Hi, this is Pete. For April Fool's Day this year, I am doing an office prank, which is a modern take of the coin glued to the ground trick, you know, where you see people try to pick it up, I can't pick it up, and then they stand there for 15 minutes like an idiot. Well, modern take, I'm gonna shock them with a piezo igniter, the one that we sell. So I'm gonna show you how I set that up both in the electronic and the physical manifestation, and then we'll get some video of hopefully a sucker who sticks their hand in. So let's check it out. So in brief, start with this is my list of components here. The igniter. The igniter has a really hard push button, right? So how am I going to do that? Well, I'd use the HS805BB servo, which is good to like 300 plus ounce inches. SKU is ROB-11881. Now, the other thing you got to set up here is how do you actually shock someone with this thing, right? You hold the thing in your hand, you press that button, and you shock your friends. Oh, that's really good fun. But when it comes right down to it, excuse me, you actually have to have two leads to do this. Now, when this thing is installed in a barbecue, what it is, and this is just my surmising after looking at this thing, we're like, where's the other lead, right? So you have the button assembly, then you have the cable here, and then you have this guy. Now, most of the zap comes from there, and it doesn't do that. It's more like that. It looks something like that. And you would think that the other polarity, be it negative or positive, is going to be this guy, which is actually the mounting tab. Turns out it's not. That's got nothing to do with it. If you want to get to the other polarity, the other side of the polarity, you got to go to this thing, which makes, okay, let me describe this. That case has like a wire which is recessed in a groove in the side of this thing that runs there, right? There's no realistic way that you can have access to it except for this tiny little window up here, and you can just get a lead soldered onto that. Now you may be going, how does this work at all? Well, if you imagine it installed in a barbecue, right, this thing makes like 20, 30,000 volts. I mean, it makes a big, big arc. So jumping from this thing, which is in this tiny hole in a metal case, real easy to jump to the chassis of your barbecue. So in that way, it completes the circuit. Real simple. For our purposes, I had to solder a wire onto that guy and string it out, right? So I'll show you that as we go. Now, I'm also using the OpenPIR as a sensor, so it'll see someone's hand coming in and then it will start to shock. Bigger problem though. How do you, even with the two leads, right? So I got a lead there and I got a lead here. How do you shock somebody with that? So what you do, what I'm doing is I found a place in our break room, right? So there's the kitchen cabinets. That looks nothing like a kitchen cabinet. And like the cabinet door, which is totally square, and that's not a very good representation. But on the floor, I can open up the cabinet door and I can put my apparatus in here and string a wire down here to the floor through the molding that goes around the bottom, and I'll put the coin on top of that, and I'll glue that down with some 5-minute epoxy. Then the other lead, I'm gonna string out through another hole, and I'm gonna color it black. So it's sticking out, right? So this is the floor. I don't know if you can see this. And if I color that black, somebody will put their hand down there and they won't be able to see, hopefully they won't be able to see any wire. They won't see this because that'll be behind the molding. And then the PIR sensor will be underneath that lip there. And as soon as it sees somebody put their hand down there, black. Now the way I've got this set up is it will shock somebody, correction, it will press that button 4 times. Hopefully that'll be enough, and hopefully the person's hand is within about 1 centimeter and they're touching the coin. So there's a lot of ifs here, but that's how I'm setting this up. Other things I'm using, Pro Mini 5 volt, Dev 11113, and the igniter COM 10235, and I think that's it. Now let me show you the circuit before we do the big stuff. All right, so here's what I've got set up. Now there are a zillion ways you could pull this off, so bear with me. I've chosen a 2S LiPo cell for power, and my big concern right from the get-go is driving that button down. So the servo, right, HS805BB, will take up to 6 volts, and as far as I know, it's going to take a whole lot of torque to push that button down. So I'm going to run this thing with 6 volts. I've set up an LM317 to put out the 6 volts, and that goes straight to the servo. Now, Originally, I had powered the rest of the circuit off of this 6 volts as well, but what I found was that the LM317, once the servo was driving and it was pushing that button, it get really hot and start to go into thermal shutdown. And in fact, I think I destroyed the first one. So what I've done alternately is to run a 7805 to get my 5 volts. So I bring that down to my Pro Mini, and the Pro Mini gives power to the PIR directly off of its regulator. So now when this thing starts to get taxed, oh, also, I screwed a big hunk of metal to the LM317 to sort of buy me some time. This only has to work for 1 day. And believe me, when you see what's inside that box, you're gonna be like, jeez, does that suck? Yes, it does, but it only has to work for a day. So, alternate power source 7805, this runs all of this stuff. The problem I was having is that when this thing would brown out, the PIR would reset. And if you've played with OpenPIR, you know that the setup time, you can adjust it, but it's usually about a minute or 2 minutes, takes a while, so you don't want this thing to reset. So with the alternate 7805, I got no problems. Let's see, that's good. Let's look in the box. So here's inside the box. The apparatus is based around this piece of, I think it's 3/8 plywood. I've got the button mounted in a hole and hot glued in there. I've got this arm hinged at the very back with a screw, which is secured to the bottom side of the wood with some goop, which is the glue, you know, the glue goop. And a piece of Actobotics channeling that I cut loose, and a little pad that I made to screw onto this thing to help secure that button down really well. Servo's on the underside of the wood. My push rod, or pull rod as it is a piece of heavy gauge electrical wire out of our closet of electrician stuff in the basement, because that was the strongest thing I could find. Let's see. Pro Mini is up here. The 2 regulators, which are totally not secure because I was doing this in a hurry, are up here. You can see this big hunk of metal up here. That's the LM317, and the only piece of metal I had on hand was, again, one of the Actobotics things, so I screwed that down. This is going to buy me some time. Let's see, what else can I tell you? This is the other wire. And you remember how I told you the ground, I don't know the potential. I don't have any way of measuring 20,000 volts to figure out which is plus and minus. Doesn't matter. So the other lead, whatever it is soldered down into that little tiny hole, and you can see, I drew it wrong on the board. But along the length of the thing here is that. So you would assume that when you put it in the barbecue, that the chassis of the barbecue is just going to jump. It's going to arc from there to the chassis, and that's how it completes the circuit. All right, so when this thing is on, and hopefully you can see this spark, but when I wave my hand in front of the PIR sensor, which is right over here, and I can actually feel, like, my arm is on these 2 things, and I think it's starting to arc through. 20,000 volts or 30,000 volts, I mean, if it's going a centimeter, it's 30,000 volts, right? That's a big freaking arc. So 30,000 volts will go through just about anything, all right? And the first thing I would tell you is when you start playing with this, at the bottom of the piezo igniter is some heat shrink. That will not protect you. The heat shrink is only good to maybe 600 or 800 volts. This makes way more voltage than that. And by the way, it's only fair that I test this on myself to make sure I'm not going to kill anybody. Yeah, that's really tasty. So there, that's everything. Oh, last thing, why is it in a box? Because this thing is noisy. So I'm gonna close up this box. I got a power switch strung to the outside, and in fact, this box is going to go in a bigger box with more padding, because I don't want people tipped off that something is going on. You know, maybe they don't get shocked the first time. I don't want them going, hey, what is that? What's going on? So it's gonna go inside of 2 boxes, and like that. Now all we gotta do is install it. Here is the installation. Here's the double boxed unit, and here's my high voltage leads and my sensor. And the sensor's down under here, and It'll zap me. Although I will tell you, I've been having trouble with the PIR resetting all the time. I had been fighting this for a while. I thought I had secured this with the separate supply. Apparently I'm not controlling my high voltage well enough, and I really did try to. So, if you were doing a cool prank for April Fool's Day, be sure to tag us. And if you want to make one of these things, give me a shout, and I don't know, I'll give you a thumbs up. See ya. Bye.